Chapter 53. An accidental blessing too. However, at the next instant, Xu Qing's eyes abruptly widened. He saw his dagger piercing through the body of the gray-robed man and pinning him to the wall behind him. However, it was as though the other party didn't have a physical body. There was no change at all. The poison powder was the same. It penetrated his body and splattered all over the ground. This scene caused Xu Qing's nerves to instantly tense up. He paused for a moment and was about to continue retreating. At that moment, the gray-robed man laughed. His figure slowly disappeared from Xu Qing's sight. First, it was his legs, then his body. When his head was about to disappear, his voice echoed, "Kid, someone asked me to give you this token. It's an entry qualification for the 7 Blood Eyes. On the map on the back, you can use the token to teleport to any branch city once for free." After those words were spoken, the servant's figure completely vanished, as though he had never appeared. Xu Qing, who was standing there, fell silent for a very long time as he watched everything. He could sense the strangeness of the other party and the helplessness of being weak. A long time later, Xu Qing silently walked over and pulled out his dagger. He then lowered his head and looked at the token on the ground. The white token had its front facing up, and it was carved with complicated patterns. Under the moonlight, it seemed to be reflecting light, and it was filled with an ancient feeling. Xu Qing fell silent and wore his gloves as he carefully picked it up to take a look. On the back of the token was a map. There were hundreds of bumps on it, indicating one city after another. 7 Blood Eyes, Xu Qing mumbled. He had heard of the 7 Blood Eyes from Captain Lei and knew that they were one of the few great and ruthless forces in the Nanhuang continent. Every year, countless people wanted to join their sect. However, the entry requirements for the 7 Blood Eyes were very strict. It wasn't something that could be casually entered. One needed an entry token. However, the distribution of this token was extremely rare. Xu Qing didn't know why he had received it, nor did he know the gray-robed man or the authenticity of the token. However, after pondering for a while, he felt that with the other party's terrifying strength, there was no need for him to be fooled. Hence, there was a high chance that this token was real. "Why are you giving it to me?" Xu Qing couldn't understand, but he noticed how the other party addressed him. The word kid had many meanings. There was a broad meaning and a special meaning. In this scavenger campsite, the term kid was a name that only belonged to Xu Qing. To be able to call out his name at the scavenger campsite meant that the other party understood him very well. Moreover, the other party had mentioned in his words that someone had asked him to deliver the token. This meant that the gray-robed man had a companion, and this companion's status was much higher. Could it be Grandmother Bai? Xu Qing lowered his head and checked the token. After a while, he hesitantly kept it. At that moment, the sky was starting to brighten. Xu Qing stuffed the bricks on the wall at the back of the house back to their original state and fed the wild dogs in the courtyard. Although these fellows were very useless, after raising them for a long time, feeding them had become a habit. Xu Qing was about to head out for class when he saw over 10 wild dogs fighting to eat their food. However, he stopped after taking a few steps and sat silently in the courtyard. "I'm also used to it," Xu Qing mumbled. He sat there until the sky was bright. He then stood up and walked out of the courtyard, entering the campsite. He was very familiar with the campsite, but at that moment, he felt a sense of unfamiliarity. Cross and Luan Tooth hadn't returned for a long time as well. As Xu Qing walked, he suddenly missed the lab in the canyon. Although that place was a forbidden zone that was filled with dangers, the longing in his heart was still very strong. At the same time, Xu Qing also prepared to try concocting the white pills. Hence, he took a deep breath and was about to leave the campsite and head to the forbidden zone. However, before he could leave the campsite, someone shouted behind him, "Kid, kid." The voice was somewhat familiar. Xu Qing turned and saw a white-haired old man in a leather coat running toward him. This person was an old scavenger from the campsite. No one knew his exact name. Everyone called him Old Stone. He was also one of the 5 or 6 people Xu Qing saved when he carried Captain Lei back. Later on, just like Bone Blade, he often came to Xu Qing's place to buy insurance. "Hey, kid, I took on a big job," Old Stone said excitedly. As he quickly explained, Xu Qing understood. This old rock in front of him had used some unknown method during this period of time to successfully make the young men and women who had arrived a few days ago outside the campsite hire him as a guide to head to the cluster of temples in the Forbidden Zone's jungle. This time, he came to find him to buy insurance. As usual, 5 white pills. If I don't return in a week, I'll have to trouble you to come to the temple cluster to save me, Old Stone said with a smile. A week? Xu Qing was a little surprised. That's right, this group of pampered people in the Purple Earth insisted on staying there for a week. However, the remuneration is very generous, so I decided to give it my all. After I finish this job, I plan to retire. Old Stone sighed. As an old scavenger, he was very clear that staying in the Forbidden Zone for a week would cause the risk and anomalous substances absorbed to increase exponentially. However, the reward was too much, enough for him to purchase the right to stay in a nearby city. Therefore, he wanted to risk it and prepared enough white pills. Xu Qing frowned slightly. He wasn't prepared to continue taking on such matters, especially since he needed time to study the white pills. Hence, he was just about to reject Old Stone when he saw Old Stone's white hair and expectant expression. Xu Qing couldn't help but think of Captain Lei. After a moment of silence, he nodded. This is the last time. With that, he accepted the white pills under Old Stone's gratitude and walked out of the campsite, heading straight for the Forbidden Zone. At that moment, the fog appeared in the Forbidden Zone, covering the area and spreading in all directions. Outside the range of the fog, near the Forbidden Zone's poisoned dragon pool, there was a scavenger hiding in a gap in a tree with a look of horror on his face. His body was trembling. Surrounding him were 4 figures. Their gazes were cold as they searched. There's fog. As long as I persist, the kid will definitely come and save me. The person hiding was none other than Bone Blade, who had bought insurance from Xu Qing many times. There's fog. The instant he entered the jungle of the Forbidden Zone, Xu Qing stopped in his tracks. He could feel his shadow distorting a little. He had encountered such a situation before. It was a sign that the fog had appeared in the Forbidden Zone. If one looked carefully, one could even see traces of very thin fog in the forest. Xu Qing was a little hesitant, but after some thought, he still chose to enter the jungle. On one hand, he needed to go to the canyon lab. On the other hand, although the help from the shadow couldn't be sustained for too long, it was enough for him to head to the canyon. Moreover, when the fog appeared, it looked dangerous, but it was the same for mutated beasts. So to a certain extent, it was safer than before. However, the prerequisite was that he wouldn't get lost in the inner area, and the anomalous substances wouldn't increase either. Hence, Xu Qing sped up and shuttled through the jungle. 2 hours later, when the fog slowly grew thicker, Xu Qing stopped in his tracks and arrived at the location where the night lizard skin was located. He stood on a large tree at the side and tilted his head to look at the north. That's the area of the poisoned dragon pool in the jungle of the Forbidden Zone. The scavengers had divided the terrain into several points, and the poisoned dragon pool was one of them. Regarding this poisoned dragon pool, Xu Qing had heard of it many times. Most of the time, it was what Bone Blade had said. This was because every time the other party bought insurance, the designated rescue area would be the poisoned dragon pool. Xu Qing thought about it. Bone Blade had bought insurance too many times. He remembered that the other party had bought it once 2 days ago. Although it wasn't time yet, since the fog had appeared and he was nearby, he might as well go over and take a look. At the thought of this, Xu Qing's body swayed, and he leapt up from the tree crown, moving closer to the location of the poisoned dragon pool. As he got closer, Xu Qing slowly narrowed his eyes. His expression revealed vigilance and his movements became increasingly concealed. He saw someone. The other party wore a black leather coat and had a sinister mask on his face. He held a longsword that emitted a cold light and was searching. His body emitted extraordinary spirit energy fluctuations, giving Xu Qing the feeling that he had reached Firecrow's level back then. Xu Qing observed for a moment before he nimbly moved away. However, it wasn't long before he saw a second person dressed similarly. Their cultivation levels were similar, and this caused Xu Qing to feel some doubt in his heart. He's not a scavenger. After Xu Qing muttered to himself, he became even more cautious. After circling the perimeter of the poisoned dragon pool, he saw Bone Blade.